What does America get right? My school just put out an aviation program and got a shit ton, over $20K, worth of airliner equipment and 2, broken down, planes completely for free. It's an awesome program with some dedicated people behind it. Trying to get my private certificate so hard. I have a discovery flight tomorrow. I dream of a career in aviation. Just doesn't seem possible right now. Edit. Thank you friendly strangers for your words of encouragement. I genuinely appreciate it. I don't know how Germany isn't the beauty capital of the world. If you ask where to find a public bathroom, you're instructed to go 3 blocks down to some small restaurant where you need to go down some stairs into a cellar that leads to some other restaurant with a bathroom behind the kitchen where you'd better have some coin handy or you'll have to keep holding it until you get to the next town. Crazy to think that if they tried to do the movement today, it wouldn't have succeeded. They even acknowledge this in that article. I think an effort like that today would very quickly polarize into people who were adamantly against it or to people who would demand that we do something. In the 70s, we walked the middle that doesn't seem to exist anymore. Living in a country where most of the bands/artists that I like tend not include it in their touring destination, it makes me really envious of the people who get to enjoy the live shows. For example, a friend of mine in the US, told me that he has seen Iron Maiden, when they performed in a small venue of just 200 people. That sort of thing. To be fair, the metal scene is kind of like where the rock scene was 60 years ago. You can still follow your favorite band from city to city, you can still see them in amazingly intimate venues, and you don't have to pay an arm and a leg to see a show. I will never forget my first time in Europe. My group stopped for lunch in a small village in the middle of Latvia on the way to Estonia. Walked into this small local restaurant and ordered a New York-style pizza while Don't Stop Believing played on the radio. Now I know that most of Europe is really modernized, but it was a very surreal moment to see just how much American culture has permeated the rest of the world. NASA, even with all the government and political bullshit, it's still taking great strides in taking humanity forward, but more importantly they focus a lot on educating the common folks during missions. I love that all the information and pictures and everything NASA produces are publicly accessible for free, and not even under copyright. I'm not even American, but NASA had a great role in creating interest in me about space and astronomy when I was growing up. Revisiting its history in TV documentaries time and time again. Here in Canada we'll do it once, rerun it, and then bury it in a vault or archive, never to be broadcast or available as a DVD, or VHS back in the day, ever again. There's a lot of Canadian documentaries and broadcast TV rotting away like this. I gotta say though, when WW3 starts I'd be shocked if the History Channel didn't personally have film crews on every mission. Honestly, if WW3 is started by some secret villain mastermind behind the scenes, my solid bet would be the History Channel, just desperate for something besides WW2 to talk about. My dad used to hand me cash and send me to the machine down the street to grab him a pack. No one bat an eye back in the day. Granted, this was years ago, before they added electronic age verification, but the machines are still everywhere. And knowing my dad, if they had the technology back in the day, he would have just handed me his driver's license to unlock it, haha. Also, smoking zones in schools for students 16 and up. We would be spending the breaks having a cigarette with the teachers, lol. Targeted children with anti-smoking education first. Yeah, once the government and public caught wind of that, It was all downhill for the tobacco companies. That's why all the revelations of Facebook targeting kids as young as 6 is such a huge deal. If they are found to have targeted kids using psychologically addictive means to entice them to use their products, they're going to be fucked. The ADA. America is really accessible compared to many of if not most other places. I consider myself able-bodied and I travel a lot. When I do, I'm reminded how special the ADA is, and as an able-bodied person I'm also aware that designing things for everyone makes them better for everyone. Edit. Typo. I never would have thought of this, but yes, I work in parks and playgrounds have so many ADA equipment in them now. If you see stairs on a playground that seemingly go nowhere, it's actually for wheelchair access. This is so true. Lots of smaller cities and towns are behind, but you can visit most major cities and get around relatively easily. Plus it helps everyone, including people pushing strollers and people who just can't reliably pick their feet up over curbs every time. This one. I'm American but I lived in Europe and have traveled to many countries in different parts of the world. I was shocked at how some first world countries still had very limited accommodations for disabled people. Edit. To clarify, I wasn't speaking about old buildings, structures. There were plenty of places where a wheelchair ramp could be added and there was none. There's a general attitude of openness and personal expression. Generally speaking, people do not within the norm hide who they are to be more presentable in public. This means that people with bad tastes, manners, and worldview are more shameless and eager to be in public. This same American lack of inhibition also means that people with disabilities are more likely to be out and visible in public places than secluded in homes and institutions. People are just exposed to more difference in the US and they normalize disability in public. Convenience. I love going to Europe, but every time I go I miss the convenience of America. Grocery stores have everything you could want. 80 different cereals or potato chips. We got it. It's 2 a.m. and I want pancakes. How about a burger? Well, the diner down the road from me has it. Within a few miles of my house I can get Chinese, Jamaican, pizza, Korean, sushi, BBQ, Mexican, Indian, Thai, etc. Maybe I want to go shopping at 10 p.m. and buy a toaster. Well, Walmart and Target are open. I admire the simplicity in some countries since places tend to close earlier, especially on Sunday. But here you can get what you want, when you want. I take it for granted until I travel overseas. Turning Halloween into an all-ages celebration. The kids get to trick-or-treat, the adults throw their own parties, everyone gets to dress up and have fun. I love driving and walking through neighborhoods and seeing people who have gone crazy decorating their lawns and houses with horror decorations. Some even turn their places in haunted houses that people could go through while they trick-or-treat. It's even fun when you go into regular stores like Target and they get into the spirit by playing scary theme music on the Paw Thriller always seems to be playing somewhere. As an American, I couldn't say it better. Collectively, we seem like fat assholes who would treat you poorly if we disagree with you. In reality, many of us do our best to be as friendly and understand other cultures, try to overcome the stigma of Americans, and just generally have at least some experience with dozens of cultures because of the diversity of our country. Don't get me wrong, there are plenty of racists here, but most of us hate them and want things to change for the better here. The majority of Americans want to fix America in the sense that we want to be friends with the rest of the world. The ultra-rich and idiots make the rest of us very depressed and stressed. As an immigrant living in America, I validate his statement. Although my experience over a couple years has been from living in bigger cities, I have never met people more friendly. Anywhere I go, people are ready to converse with you and almost always curious about my culture. Whether it be in a cab, at the hairdresser, hell, even those restaurants which cook food right in front you. Everyone smiles and talks to you and genuinely seem to want to talk. Where I come from, people are friendly too, but small talk and smiles in business is not the norm. Go to the hairdresser, he cuts your hair while you sit silently and on your way. But here in US, just today, the person cutting my hair was asking me about Diwali and how and why we celebrate it. Thank you, America. I will take this learning and expand it back home. Fellow Kanak here, and I agree. My GP is American and is the best one I've ever had. Very genuine and kind with a fantastic sense of humor. I actually look forward to going to the doctor. Also, American cheese. Not even joking a bit. I don't want oily, gloopy cheddar on my burger. I want creamy, melty goodness. American cheese doesn't deserve all the hate it gets. In certain applications it is perfection. Edit. Some examples of where American cheese is unbeatable: grilled cheese, any kind of melt, cheeseburger, bacon, egg and cheese sandwich. That is not to say that other cheeses aren't good with those foods, but if I can only have one for the rest of my life, it is American, and it's not a tough choice. Retail. I go to a store in Canada and they'll have maybe 2 or 3 options for the item I'm looking for. I go to the same store in the US and it'll be more like 6 or 7 to choose from. Often better quality for less money. The last 18 months showed me how much I took living in a border city for granted, being able to pop over there for a shopping trip. We got a long way to go, but most people don't realize we have the biggest diverse population by a lot. Compared to the total US population, UK is 20% the population and Canada is 10%, Germany is 25%. These are the closest diverse countries culture-wise. The US does a decent job of tolerating one another. Most other countries that score high on economic policies that is more socialized, and other measures have really strict immigration policies and very small populations in comparison. According to my friends who moved here from Germany and Canada, the freedom to be whatever you want, not so much career-wise as just expressive of personality-wise. They both felt that being different in those places made you stick out like a sore thumb. The German also pointed out that career paths are very restricted there. You get on a track and you stuck there. I was listening to the Scottish comic Daniel Sloss on Conan O'Brien's podcast the other day, and he said something similar. He said, in America, if only one guy in an audience finds you funny, he will laugh loudly and without shame, but other places there had to be group consensus whether to laugh. Kind of interesting. Giving in times of need. I think the government always cocks things up, but when awful stuff happens somewhere, average Americans want to help. Horrific volcanic disaster in the Caribbean. Just hours later, people are texting in donations to rescue and recovery efforts. Hurricane Katrina. Cajun Navy shows up to help. Earthquake and famine in Haiti. You have musicians Pamplemousse figuring out how to get goats to people in need. While there are always exceptions, I think average Americans, paycheck to paycheck, truck driving, weekend football, everyday Americans, want to help when and where they can. My favorite quote from The Martian by Andy Weir: every human being has a basic instinct to help each other out. If a hiker gets lost in the mountains, people will coordinate a search. If a train crashes, people will line up to give blood. If an earthquake levels a city, people all over the world will send emergency supplies. This is so fundamentally human that it's found in every culture without exception. Yes, There are assholes who just don't care, but they're massively outnumbered by the people who do. This is my one idealist belief that I will not budge on no matter how many times I get called naive. People will say wait until you get into the real world, then you'll find out how awful everyone is, but I've found that the older I get the more I believe it. Freedom of speech and press. Many people don't appreciate that the reason America seems to have so many problems is largely that the problems get exposed and discussed whether the government likes it or not. Many countries that seem more orderly seem that way because the government controls information flow. I have a friend that lives in Malaysia and we sometimes talk about how crazy America is. She will mention things she hears in the news and be critical because so much crazy shit is reported. She thinks the entire country is going insane. My main response is America will always look bad because we broadcast our shit for the world to see. The moment you stop seeing the American government acting crazy, or we suddenly look like everything is totally fine, then you need to worry. So many other countries have strict rules on what can be broadcast, what information can get in and out, and obviously, it makes them look better to the outside, but that is often just a facade. A lot of things. I'm not American, but the world owes the Americans gratitude for so many techs and startups and inventions that has made life on this planet more convenient or easier. The internet, for example. I understand the innovation process isn't a solitary affair and you build upon previous knowledge and innovations, but you still got to give credit where credit's due. Also, the porn. We are a very expressive, passionate nation. I just got back from Europe and although they aren't unhinged like us, a lot of them lack common courtesy and friendliness. I missed being able to make a slight remark towards a total stranger without them looking at me like I was a freak. I took several trips to the UK just before COVID and this drove me insane. I was on the train from Heathrow and I made sure not to take up space, carry on between my legs, etc. I commented about how humid it was. You'd thought I slapped someone. They had the formal pleasantries down, but I felt no one would have helped an elderly lady cross the street. I did to Dublin for 2 nights and Scotland for 3 nights. I can confirm they weren't like that. While in a Dublin taxi, the driver asked me basic questions. I said I had just been in London 2 weeks earlier. I live in NYC. And he asked how that was. I hesitated and said I appreciated the atmosphere of the Irish. He said oh they're fine, it's too bad that stick got too far up their asses so they can't reach it. I always try to be a good tourist, but I lost it and burst out laughing. The fact that strangers typically don't talk to each other in other countries is nerve-wracking for me. I would have missed out on so many great conversations and people just in passing if we were like that. I talk to everybody that is interested in conversation. I can't tell you how many times I've met some random person, hit it off with them, then went our separate ways. It's how I get most of my recommendations for things like TV, movies, books, music, hobbies, or even career guidance. It sounds so isolating to live in a culture where that is uncommon. It's the biggest reason I'm hesitant to move abroad. The interstate. Imagine the Autobahn but scaled up to an entire continent. It is one of the safest and least congested road systems in the world and has easily been one of the single biggest contributions to America's success. The simple fact you can drive from New York to LA in relative comfort on flat, paved roads is insane outside the US. It's like driving from Moscow to Madrid. except you drive mostly in straight lines and at high speeds with almost no risk of accidents, and the few that occur are often not deadly. There is a gas station and convenience store every few miles, a restaurant every few miles, a rest place every few miles,